They completely veered off the source material. Might I add, that's only the reason Marvel has gotten better, too, is because they stay more close to the source material without straying away.
Exactly.
So your whole borrowing is irrelevant? No, actually, it's exactly the reverse. The more you borrow from the source material, the better you are.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with DC, man. The more they actually take and stay close to the source material, the better they are. And you want to have this talk about why Game of Thrones is getting awful? Duh, because they strayed so far from the source material. I mean, everybody keeps saying over and over and over, I hate these seasons. I hate these seasons. Why? Guys, because everything after Dance of Dragons is fan fiction. And that was after season 4.
Yep.
So everything after season 4 is completely off the cuff. So if you hate it past season 4, then yeah, that's because they stopped taking so much from the source material. Kobe Mack here. He actually asked me on Twitter. He said, you're a book reader. Cersei's prophecy not playing out in the show, which technically never acknowledged it. How is that for you? Okay, well, actually, I'm not quite sure how that question is supposed to go because they did acknowledge it.
They did.
I'm not sure what exact season it is, but it's where Cersei and her friend are going into the witch's hut.
I mean, season 4, season 5.
Yeah, so if you're talking about that part of it, yeah, they did acknowledge that, but it actually did happen. I mean, they never said it exactly. It was Marjorie Tyrell. They just said it was someone who would be more prettier and fairer than her that would cast her aside. So you could take that as Dany too. How do I feel about the show veering so off of like prophecies? Well, first of all, they don't add a lot of prophecies in the show.
No,
there's quite a bit that they don't ever talk about, and then there's one specific that they've just slapped in the face that I cannot believe they actually slapped in the face, which was the Azor Ahai one, which was the prince that was promised that you see them entertain throughout the whole show. Cersei's prophecy, am I upset that didn't come true? Kind of did. I mean, am I upset that it didn't play out exactly as the way I would like to play out? Not really. I judged the show, like I've said before, different, but I judge the show and the book different. However, I still do judge the show off of the book because you cannot write a fantasy based off a mythopoeic like Game of Thrones and think you cannot judge it off the source material. It's ridiculous. Would you read another story off Lord of the Rings and not judge it off the original Lord of the Rings books? I mean, come on now.
I mean, that's such a silly question to ask.
I mean, seriously, you'd be... I mean, if you were like... I mean, anyone who would just be like, an orc? What is an orc? Where'd they get the orc from? I mean, it's like, come on now.
How did that happen? No, I mean, what's how you've been saying? I mean, you have to go off of it. I mean, and if people are gonna get mad about this. I mean, you can even go back to Harry Potter. People judge that off of the books as well. I mean, there have been so many movies and so many TV shows made off of books that you go off the source material, the original books, and you take it from that and you rip it apart.
And they're always better when you go off of the book.
Exactly.
You made a great point. Harry Potter went pretty close to the book. Harry Potter's a good movie series, good film series. A show that didn't go off the book, The Mist.
Right?
Terrible show series. So I really think people who say that are irrelevant.
Well,
I think that question's irrelevant.
It's kind of funny. I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, and I was talking with a group of people, and we were talking about Game of Thrones, and this person had the audacity to tell me that Game of Thrones is like Lord of the Rings.
It is kind of, in a sense.
Well,
it is.
In a sense, but there's so much different, though.
Yeah, they are. They're very different. They are and they aren't. I'll tell you how they're similar, and it really is judging apples to oranges. And this is an interesting topic. I've actually had this conversation with people before too. Which is better and bigger, Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones? Lord of the Rings. It is obviously Lord of the Rings is.
Because they follow the books.
Well, no. I mean, I mean the sense you were saying what is bigger and is grander, like in the sense of lore and like what's more. Like I said, it's apples to oranges because. And I've always wanted to talk about this conversation, or I've always wanted to talk about the subject because they're both mythopoeias. Let's get that out of the way. They both are. They both have source material Bibles, basically. Game of Thrones has the World of Ice and Fire, while Lord of the Rings has the Silmarillion, which is, if you don't know what either one of those books are, you're missing out because they're both the Bibles of the of all the books. Basically, Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, great. It's a bunch of poems in Elvish, English. I mean, all kinds of stuff about how the orcs were created, about how the whole world was created. World of Ice and Fire is basically about the whole history of Game of Thrones, all the houses that exist in Westeros and the known world, and every aspect of the world of Game of Thrones. Now, the difference between the two is that Game of Thrones is a little less more fantasy-ish, meaning it's more focused on the families and the houses with a little bit of fantasy on the side, such as the Children of the Forest, the White Walkers, mammoths, giants, little things like that. As Lord of the Rings, I mean, you got like Luvatar, which is the god who basically, and then there's like the minor characters, like Gandalf, I can't remember what their names are, but they're basically forms of angels. And then, and then you got the orcs and the elves and everything like that. Now, here's where Lord of the Rings does beat out Game of Thrones. Now, Lord of the Rings has its own language.
It does.
It has Elvish in it, and it has all these different forms of Elvish. And many people are saying, well, so does Game of Thrones. Actually, a lot of the Game of Thrones language you hear is actually made up on the show. So that's one of the big differences are. In the forms of detail, though, I would say still goes to Lord of the Rings. I mean, even though Game of Thrones is very detailed in the lore, it's still recycled. There's a lot of recycled names, recycled stories, basically everything is recycled in Game of Thrones. I mean, that's how we're able on this podcast to guess a lot of the current season, because we've read the books and we know kind of already the history and the lore, so it's kind of easy to guess what happens because they take a lot from the source material.
Yes, they do.
So it's kind of easy, but overall, Lord of the Rings is still much grander, but it's a very close tie. I mean, I would have to say Lord of the Rings would get like a 9.9, Game of Thrones would get it like a 9.8.
Very close.
Yeah.
I want to switch it back over to the show real quick. And how we saw the episode end with Arya just wandering the streets covered in soot and blood.
Oh, after her big episode with Sandor and the whole of it.
Sandor.
I don't know if I like that. That's the only part of the show I didn't like that time.
I mean, I was honestly disappointed. I mean, because they made such a big deal
about her
Arya finishing off her list and Sandor saying, "No, you don't want any part of this. Go off, girl." I mean, really?
Yeah, everyone was like, that's why I understand. She was all of a sudden, she changed her mind about revenge, and she's like, oh, no, I don't want to kill Cersei. It's like, then why don't you just marry Gendry?
I know. I mean,
if you didn't want, you're like, oh, I'm not a lady because I have to go assassinate someone. Then you're like, oh, I'm a lady. I don't want to, go kill her. I just thought it was dumb.
Yeah, that
everyone liked it. Some people liked it. I thought that was the most dumbest part of the arc.
I mean, it just pissed me off. I mean, that was, to me, that was another reason why I kind of hated the writing for this episode, is because they just killed off all that they just did from the past 5 seasons. Her is killing off one of these guys one by one.
Mm-hmm.
And this question was even brought up to me too by my brother. He was wondering about the horse that wandered.
Oh, the pale horse?
The pale horse.
Yeah, I actually thought that right away. I was like, look, Death is giving her a way out.
Well, my brother actually was asking me if Bran actually warged into the white horse and went to go find Arya and just was waiting for her.
Interesting. That's an interesting theory. That's just like the theory I also heard about Varys poisoning Dany.
I heard that too, yes.
That basically the subtitles are, when you watch the episode, is that Varys is all like, the little girl tells Varys, they're watching me, and he's like, oh, we're in the kitchens, and he's like, what's she been up to? And she's like, she hasn't eaten. He's like, oh, we'll try again at supper.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting notation, but I personally don't think Varys would do that because he has no need to.
Well,
he has really no need to. Even though he thought Dany was, I guess you could say, mad, he really didn't know at first. I mean, come on now.
True.
I mean, that's silly. I'm talking, and I'm going completely off the book. Varys wouldn't do that, but the show Varys, I thought he was even a cheap way to die. I didn't even agree with that way.
No, I mean, but
it is what it is, though.
But Dany does say, if you betray me, I'll burn you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't think Varys was trying to poison her? Because to me, it seemed like he was worried about her well-being, basically.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
And there are small little details too, people brought up from the first to go off the first season, the whole letter Ned writes saying that Joffrey is not the true king. It's one of Robert's bastards, and that's what a lot of people were thinking what Varys was writing. Ned
said it. Stannis is the true king.
Oh yeah, Stannis was the true king. But I found that kind of nice to kind of put some of the first season back into the last season. Other than that, nothing else surprised me.
I enjoyed it.
It was a good episode, and for those who didn't know, Jaime said to Bronn that I would want to die in the arms of the woman I loved. And
yeah, everyone thought that was Brienne.
No, his true love, as always, was
Cersei.
His sister!
Yeah, I thought that was gross. That's all I could ever think about, too. That's your sister, bro. Just like him and his Aunt Dany. Just like Jon and his Aunt Dany, man.
Oh, yes.
But, alright, I think that's going to wrap it up for this recap. And we're going to actually end this one off for a send-off to Cersei here. In this song, this is going to be the Reigns of Castamere on Real Sharks, Game of Thrones podcast.